Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is all about the Kaleido Sniper M2 roaster. So this video is a part of a series all about this roaster. But in this video, we are going to explain how to use the Kaleido M2, especially if you're using it for the first time. Then in the next video, I'm going to give you guys a really deep review and tell you guys what I think about this thing and what I think maybe could be some of the good things about it and some of the things that definitely are not so great about it. And in this video, I will only be talking about how to use the tablet that comes with this roaster. If you are interested in the artisan version, leave a comment below, just say artisan, and if enough people tell me they want to see it, I'll show you guys and we'll do a really deep dive how to download it, install it, because it is a little bit of a procedure. So if you're interested in that, let me know down below and we'll do that stuff later. So you've just purchased your Kaleido M2 roaster and it's time to get started. I'll be honest, it's not really easy. Starting on this thing is very clunky, especially if you've never roasted before. And with the price of this thing, it is typically aimed at the beginner user. So watch this video and we're going to take a deep dive and show you guys how to use this thing, get started, and then from there you'll be able to develop your own recipes. So before you get roasting, I highly recommend getting some tubing so that you can run the exhaust somewhere properly. I've got mine running up and out so that I'm not breathing the smoke in. Second thing, you want to make sure you got plenty of room. Make sure there's nothing close by because it does get quite hot externally. You don't want to touch it and you don't want anything leaning on it. And then we can switch it on and let this thing warm up. So ensure you've got a few things installed on the machine. You've got your catch tray down the bottom. You have the chaff drawer in the side of the machine up the correct way. You have the windows down, everything closed, everything ready to go. And then we can turn it on and get things warming up. So to get started, hit the start heating button. So as you could probably hear, the drum is turning. It's at the lowest speed it's allowed to roll while heating up. It will not let you turn the roller off until the machine is back below 50 degrees Celsius as well, so keep that in mind for your cool down period. I am going to turn on my temp matching alarm. And as you can see, I've got my temp set at 210 degrees Celsius. I wouldn't worry too much about that because the temp readings on this thing aren't super accurate, but we are going to do a pretty basic sort of roast on this and show you guys what I mean. Then once the roaster is at the 210 degrees Celsius, that alarm will sound, and then you want the machine to warm up for at least 10 minutes. I personally let it warm up for 20 minutes to make sure that the roaster has a nice heat soak about it so that there's less variance in your roast profiles. So as you can hear, the temp match alarm is running. So like I said, let it run for about 10 minutes, 20 minutes if you want to be a little bit more precise with your roasts. Now the coffee we're using today is a Burundi Red Bourbon Natural. I'm going to do just a medium roast on this, which I typically wouldn't for this coffee. This is something I would roast a little bit lighter, but I want to show you guys a normal sort of roast. So this roaster will do anywhere between 50 grams of coffee and up to 400 grams of coffee. Now, that doesn't mean it'll do 50 grams well. I wouldn't recommend doing that size. It's very, very tricky to roast only 50 grams of coffee in this roaster. However, you can do it if you really need to. And when you go up to 400 grams of coffee, it's very, very tricky to get 400 grams to sit in that hopper on top. So if you are going to do it, I would recommend doing something around the 3 to 320 grams of coffee. That's where I've found it to be the most precise and the most repeatable. If you're looking to roast a bag of coffee, being 250 grams, I would always keep in mind that there will be some moisture loss in the coffee as you roast it. So whatever you're going to roast, I would add about 15 to 20% of the weight that you're probably going to lose during the roast. So I'm going to weigh out 300 grams of this Burundi and then we're going to pop it in the hopper. Now before you put your coffee onto the hopper, I would recommend waiting until you're ready to drop it, because if the green bean is sitting up there, it is going to start absorbing some of that heat, which means it's going to add some variables to the next time you roast coffee if it's not sitting there for the same period. It might be a very minor difference, but it's just not worth it. Wait until you're closer to dropping your beans in. So this is the screen that comes with the M2 roaster. Like I said, there is Artisan, which you can use on your laptop. It does give you more control, but you can certainly roast using this. So now that you're ready to start roasting, there's a couple of things I would highly recommend doing. Turn your roller up to at least 80. You can go to 100. I just always run it on 80, and then you can turn the smoke, which you'll hear. So that's starting to push some air out the exhaust, just to have it ready. Let that vent and just get the flow happening. Then, while making sure that the door is closed on the hopper, we're going to pour our beans in. And now we are ready to drop the beans in. So at the same time as hitting this charge button, I am going to drop the beans in. Make sure everything is closed. I've definitely seen people make the mistake of dropping the beans in while this is open, and it obviously drops the green bean straight through into the drip tray. And then I would highly recommend having a wooden spoon of some sort, something like this, and there's a couple of reasons why. First one, as we drop beans in, there might be a little bit of scraps left in the top here, so we want to make sure that we can push those in without touching any hot metal. So let's go. Close that as soon as possible, and we are roasting coffee. So a few things are going to happen on the screen here. You can see the green, so that is your charge temperature, or the time. You can see that that dropped in, which essentially should be at your 0 seconds. And throughout this roast, there's only a couple of things I'm going to do. I am going to bump the smoke speed up a little bit as we get further along, but we're not going to worry too much about that. Things aren't too hot just yet. And the reason for that is I don't want it to be too loud so that you guys can hear me. Then you do have buttons across here. You can see the temp retention just came on, so that's where the temperature has hit the lowest point and it's going to start coming back up. That will happen automatically. Now the next few things won't happen automatically, and there's not really an issue with it. It's more for tracking in the future. So once you see this green line start to jump back up, that is your rate of rise. I hit dry end. You don't have to do that. I just do it as a marker so that if I do the same amount of coffee again, I can see if it's gotten to that point in the same amount of time. So there's a couple of things we're looking at here. Is if you look at this number here, so the red line is this one, which is your bean temperature, and then you've got the external temperature, which is the temperature inside the roaster. And you can see those both moving throughout the roast. The red line is the one you want to pay the most attention to, as that's what's changing and that's the one thing you are actually affecting. Now I would like to slow this roast down just a little bit, so I'm going to turn the fire down just by hitting the minus button, and you see the pink line has dropped down. So that is your fire line. Just going to turn that smoke up a little bit as it's starting to get fairly warm. And obviously changing this pink line being your fire, that will obviously affect the curve. So that's the main thing we're sort of looking at here. And like I said, this is a very basic way to roast coffee. We're not going to go super into detail as to how these things affect coffee, because the person buying this roaster probably isn't too concerned about that stuff just yet. Now I want to speed this roast up a little bit. We're going to bump that back up. And by no means is this a recipe for you guys to follow. This is going to be different for all beans, stuff that you need to experiment with to your taste. If you look in the window, you can see the color of the beans are starting to change quite dramatically. They're not that greeny blue color anymore. You can see they're starting to yellow up. And at this point, we're about halfway through the roast. If you want, you can hit the temp matching alarm, but we're going to drop before we get to that 210 mark, because I know that this roaster isn't as accurate as I would like it to be, so we're going to drop it a bit before that. So your first crack, which you might not even hear on this, should happen at around 196 degrees Celsius, and then second crack, which is normally a little bit louder, at 224 degrees Celsius. But keep in mind, like I said, these temps are not perfectly accurate. Speed it up a little bit. There's your first crack. It's pretty well right on temp. So let's start dropping it down, because there will be an explosion of heat coming from those beans. And we're going to get ready to drop very soon. Before we drop, we're going to hit the cooling switch. I'm going to go 208 bean temp, and then we're done. If you hit end roast, it will now allow you to save that curve. So we can save it as whatever we want. Let's put that as Burundi, and then I would always add the grams, because depending on how much coffee you put, that will be a different recipe. So we're going to save it, confirm, and then what we can do is later we can hit load and we can bring that up. So we can do, there's a few experiments in there. So then we can click on any of these that I've got Burundi, load the file, and it will bring it up so that we can either follow it or we can let the auto roast function do that. But that we're going to talk about in the next video. So as you saw as I dropped the coffee, that's the other reason we needed this, because it doesn't have any nice spinning arms or anything like that. So I just use this. Apparently you don't need to do it with this volume of coffee, but I like to do it anyway, just to help release that heat as quick as possible, because with the amount of heat that's being in there, they will keep cooking. Just like if you remove a pan from the flame, it's still going to be hot and continue to cook. Then hopefully you have some nice roasted coffee. There's a couple of things to keep in mind here. What I just did isn't a recipe by any means. I was just showing you guys a few things you can manipulate, but by any means, feel free to try it. The coffee looks drinkable. And what I mean by that is it looks nice and consistent. They all look very similar in color, which is something very important to keep in mind. Now, a little test you can do with coffee is if you break it in half, you can do what a few people call the line test. If you look closely at that internal part of the bean just across there, you can see that it's fairly consistent. I'm going to try to find a bean that isn't roasted, and you'll see a little line down the middle, which means it hasn't cooked all the way through. So this is a bean from an experiment that I did, and you can see that the outside, it looks nice and roasted, but I roasted too quickly, which gave me that line on the inside. I don't know if you can see it enough on the camera, but you can understand what I'm trying to say here is if you try to hit it with too much temperature too quickly, the heat isn't going to absorb all the way through the bean, giving you a nice consistency. It might look nice and roasted, but it's not. And another thing to keep in mind is something I've spoken about in quite a few videos in the past is coffee freshness. A lot of people go on about drinking coffee super fresh. You can absolutely drink coffee straight out of the roaster if you like. This isn't telling you not to do that, but keep in mind the darker you roast a coffee, the sooner you can typically drink it. So for a coffee like this, I would wait about 7 to 10 days before drinking it, as it's still going to have the taste of the roaster. That's what we call roasty. So I will be drinking this coffee in about a week, but I need to show you guys how to shut down the machine first. So now we're ready to shut down the roaster. We're going to move a couple of things out of the way that we don't need. The idea is we need this to cool down. So open everything up. We can take all these things out if you want as well. It's going to help it cool down even faster. Make sure we remove the chaff drawer, and we want to empty that every roast or two. As you can see, it's very small and that sits very close to the drum, which you can see it did catch a little bit of fire in the chaff drawer. That's why this is close by. And then we turn on the cooling switch. So as you can see, I did a couple of things there at the end. Number one, to help it cool down a bit faster and also clean it. So I was using just a bit of compressed air just to blow out any of the chaff that's still in there. It is going to help for consistency, obviously looking after the machine, and cool it down a little bit faster because it does take quite a bit of time. So I helped open up those wings. That was why I was grabbing those, but they are very hot. So you want to use something to do that. Let all the air out as quick as possible, get it down, and then you can switch it off and go and drink some coffee. So like I said, in the next part of this video, we are going to do a deep dive review on the Kaleido Sniper M2 roaster. So if you are interested in that, make sure you click that subscribe button and stay tuned for more content. And if you did enjoy this video in any way, please hit that thumbs up button, let the algorithm know that you like this stuff, because I really struggled to find a good video on how to use this. But that's it for now, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Have yourselves a great day and happy roasting.